From the Cronkite Studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
2020 General Election Day is just 1 year away. We'll have full team coverage, including how to prepare for your trip to the polls.
Plus, we take an in-depth look at the roadblocks some Arizonans face when registering to vote.
We're in probably the most unique or most interesting time in Arizona's history when it comes to Arizona's implication on the national map.
And why Arizona could be the tipping point state of who wins the White House.
Cronkite News starts now.
It's election day for voters across the country. From Coconino to Pima County, Arizonans are bringing their concerns to the ballot box. Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News. I'm Marcela Bayeto.
And I'm Jordan Elder. Thank you for joining us. Today's 1 year off from Election Day, and it's also a reminder that the presidential election is just 1 year away. And tonight on Cronkite News, we're bringing you the stories that matter most to voters right here in our state. Today, many Tucson residents will decide whether the city will become Arizona's first and only sanctuary city. That designation would prohibit police officers from contacting federal law enforcement agencies to determine a person's immigration status. City employees would also not be able to inquire about someone's immigration status. In 2012, the City Council proclaimed Tucson an immigrant-welcoming city.
More history could be made in southern Arizona today if City Councilwoman Regina Romero wins. She'll be Tucson's first female and first Hispanic mayor since 1875. Romero has also weighed in on Prop 205, telling AZ Central making Tucson a sanctuary city is not necessary because Tucson has a long history of welcoming immigrants and has policies addressing the role of local law enforcement on immigration. The presidential election will be held Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020.
We have full team coverage headed your way to make sure you're as informed as possible before hitting a polling booth.
Up first, Cronkite News reporter Peter Gong with how we can all be better prepared. Peter?
52 weeks from today, we'll be heading to the polls to help elect the next president. But before that, there will be the deadline to register for the presidential preference election is February 18th, 2020. The presidential preference election, which will happen on March 17th. Live in the broadcast center, Peter Gahn, Cronkite News.
The latest head-to-head polls show President Trump trailing Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. But the Democratic presidential nominee won't even be picked until the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee in mid-July.
With primary elections coming up in March, one organization is focused on breaking down the barriers people may face during the voting process. Reporter Andrew Christensen was at Arizonans for Fair Elections launch event to find out how they hope to make voting more accessible to everyone. Andrew?
I was at the Arizona State Capitol where Arizonans for Fair Elections launched a ballot initiative that would take out the influence of money in politics and prioritize voters rather than lobbyists. People in bluish-green. The proposed ballot initiative needs over 200,000 signatures by July 2nd to make it onto the ballot. In the First Amendment Forum, Andrew Christensen, Cronkite News.
In the past, Arizona has been known to be a reliably red state. However, these next elections could change that. For the first time since 1996, we could go either way in the 2020 presidential election. Cronkite News reporter Mariah Gallegos found out why the possible shift is happening.
Arizona is actually considered a toss-up state.
The Senate race is heating up. OH Predictive took a look at how much money the candidates have. Democrat Mark Kelly has $9.5 million on hand, while Republican Martha McSally, who was appointed to that office and hopes to stay, has $5.6 million, and Republican Daniel McCarthy has just $71,000 on hand. As to how fast the candidates are spending that money, McSally has the highest burn rate at 44%, followed by McCarthy with 40%, and Kelly's spending rate is about 32%. The Senate is also preparing for the possibility of a Senate trial, while the House of Representatives works to move toward the public phase of the impeachment inquiry of President Donald Trump.
According to CNN, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is getting staffers ready for what lies ahead, including 6-day work weeks, silence on the Senate floor, and a lack of other Senate business.
On the other side of the aisle, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has set up an information hub for staffers. He's coordinating with 2020 Democratic presidential candidates in the Senate if impeachment happens. It could be during a time they'd normally be on the campaign trail. Meanwhile, President Trump on Monday again attacked the anonymous whistleblower whose complaint sparked the impeachment inquiry, saying he believes the individual gave false information. The president's claim flies in the face of mounting testimony corroborating what the whistleblower said.
I think that the whistleblower gave a lot of false information, and you have to see who the whistleblower is. Once I released the transcript, which was almost immediately, the whistleblower's report was very wrong.
The rough transcript released by the White House actually confirmed much of what the whistleblower said about the call, but the president is urging reporters to disclose the whistleblower's identity, which is illegal. House investigators have spoken to nearly a dozen witnesses about Trump's efforts to pressure the government of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter.
According to a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll, 53% of Americans support impeaching President Trump, while 44% disapprove. And 88% of Democrats now support Trump's impeachment and removal from office, compared with 90% of Republicans who oppose it.
Whether he's impeached or not, there's no question President Trump has had an impact on the government, and one impact could be felt for decades if he's removed from office: his federal judicial appointments.
Cronkite News reporter Hannah Ehrlich talked to experts in Washington about what a Trump-appointed judiciary will mean.
As of Friday, the Senate had already approved 157 of President Trump's court picks, more than any of the 5 previous presidents had confirmed by November 1st of their 3rd year in office. And the Senate is voting again today on more nominees, as Trump continues to overhaul the federal bench. A bench that both sides. Trump's impact can already be seen in Arizona. 3 judges on the U.S. District Court were named by him, with 2 district court vacancies yet to fill. And 7 judges on the 9th Circuit, which includes Arizona, are Trump appointees. In Washington, Hannah Ehrlich, Cronkite News.
Well, there's no doubt President Trump is the nominee for the Republican Party. In fact, here in Arizona, the Republican Party won't even be taking part in the presidential preference election.
But here are some possible scenarios depending on the impeachment process. If the Senate does not impeach, nothing happens to change the Republican nominee for the presidential election in 2020. Donald Trump would be on the ballot. Now, the Senate could vote to impeach, but a separate vote would be required to keep him from running for federal office. If the Senate votes to impeach but allows him to run again, Trump is the likely nominee. Lastly, the Senate could impeach and vote to prevent him from running again. In that case, Vice President Mike Pence could be the nominee, or the party could choose someone else.
From you now, what issue is the most important to you in the upcoming 2020 elections? The climate, economy, immigration, or something else? So far, about 35% of you say the climate. Just go to our Cronkite News Facebook or Twitter feeds to vote in our live interactive polls.
And for continuing coverage of Election 2020, you can find us online at cronkitenews.azpbs.org. Coming up next on Cronkite News at 5, we all know about the negative impacts professional sports can have on an athlete's body.
But did you know the same is true for their mental health?
They don't want to go to the doctor because they're worried about going in debt over their health care bills.
Coming up, I'll tell you in the 7-day forecast whether the clouds rolling in the next few days will also bring some rain.
From the Cronkite Studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
It's been 1 month since the formal impeachment inquiry into President Trump began. So what are Americans thinking about the process so far? We get reaction from the White House lawn.
So many women and men have been through sexual assault in their lives, so many.
Plus, Senator Martha McSally is speaking out about sexual assaults in the military.
And illegal pumpkins? If you don't want to be left saying boo this Halloween, we'll tell you what not to do when you set out your ghoulish decorations.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Christopher Lindsay.
And I'm Mackenzie Pavicic. Thank you for joining us.
It was 1 month ago today that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced the start of an impeachment inquiry of President Donald Trump.
There's been a lot of action and a lot of arguing in the month since, but are people feeling differently about the impeachment now?
Heather Cumberledge in our Washington bureau went to the president's front yard to ask that question.
Outside of the White House today said their feelings about impeachment have changed over the course of the past month. They've only grown stronger. People like Sholo. Opinions here were pretty evenly divided about, much like the country, where polls show a slight majority backing impeachment. Reporting from the White House, Heather Cumberledge, Cronkite News.
Governor Doug Ducey will light the Arizona State Capitol's dome purple tonight in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And right now, people around the country are wearing purple in solidarity with victims and survivors. Those experiencing domestic violence can call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 for help. And Arizona Senator Martha McSally speaking out against sexual assaults in the armed forces. She spoke at the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit in Washington. McSally, the first woman in the Air Force to fly in combat, came out earlier this year saying that she was raped while serving our country.
So many have been through sexual abuse, sexual assault. I mean, it's in a crowd this size, it's a significant percentage of us. Some people take it to their grave. When it comes to our military, this is a cancer on our good order and discipline and our mission.
McSally is also making headlines for her involvement in a new gun control bill. The bill, which she and 4 other Republican senators introduced today, expands funding for mental health care, helps police work with internet service providers to monitor threats online, and even expedites the death penalty following mass shootings. The bill does not place additional restrictions on the legal purchase of firearms.
Developing now, an MLB umpire is under fire for posting a tweet threatening civil war over the Trump impeachment inquiry. In the since deleted tweet, umpire Rob Drake said he would purchase an AR-15 rifle because of the attempt to impeach the president, stating if it happens, quote, "You will have another civil war." MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred responded, saying the league will be looking into this. The MLB Umpires Association also released a statement saying the views expressed by Drake do not reflect those of the association. They added that Drake chose to express himself the wrong way. America is a technology leader, but that's not by accident. That was the message university officials brought to a Senate committee this week, urging lawmakers to continue funding research so the U.S. can keep the edge. Cronkite News reporter Brian Peach has a story from our Washington bureau.
Ask Arizona State University in Washington, Brian Peach, Cronkite News.
Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema met with officials at the White House this week to discuss veteran suicide prevention. In a meeting with Veterans Affairs Secretary Robert Wilkie and other lawmakers, Sinema discussed her desire to end the stigma of discussing suicide among veterans. She introduced legislation this year promoting information sharing between vets, their families, and the Department of Defense. That provision was passed in the Senate and has been included in the House version of the bill as well.
This week, Arizona officials announced a portion of the Loop 202 freeway will be renamed in honor of late U.S. Congressman Ed Pastor. Pastor died last year after serving over 40 years in Congress and on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. Pastor was also the first Mexican-American from Arizona to be elected to Congress.
An arrival ceremony was held today on Capitol Hill for the remains of Representative Elijah Cummings, who died last week. The late Oversight Committee chairman is now the first African-American lawmaker to lie in state at the Capitol. Remarks were given by friends and colleagues on both sides of the aisle as they remembered him for his strong moral courage and integrity.
His voice could shake mountains, stir the most cynical hearts, inspiring us all to be better.
Cummings' funeral will be held in Baltimore tomorrow.
When we come back, a travel warning for anyone heading to Sky Harbor next weekend. The impact an upcoming runway renovation could have at America's friendliest airport. Next.
And Por Tu Salud, we will explain how the Spanish version of an employee wellness program is affecting Hispanic workers right here in the Valley. Well, if Scarizona does anything for me, it just lets me know that spooky season is officially here.
So, Annika, what kind of weather can we expect for the upcoming Halloween weekend?
Well, you know, Chris, when the ghouls come out, so do the cools. Weather is cooling down just a little bit in Arizona. Let's check it out. Up north, it's especially cooler right now. It's 51 degrees in Window Rock. That is cooler than it's been in a while. And of course, down in the valley area, it's still sticking stubbornly around the 80s. As we look at...
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.